Okay, so I love this. This is perfect. Perfectly encapsulates kind of how I feel about this entire situation. And it's not what it says that perfectly encapsulates it. It's the thing that it leaves out. Because the entire process of, or the entire conversation that's been had around the El Salvadorian father who perhaps allegedly maybe was part of MS-13, who absolutely got deported by violating a court order and probably should have been deported anyway, but we don't need to get into that. This is what's going on. And I've asked, this is the question I asked at the very beginning when I first started talking about this, was at what point do we allow the people who bypass legal processes to overwhelm our system to the point where it can't handle the legal process for getting them the fuck out? And I've stated the entire time, including yesterday, when I was talking about El Presidente, that we're not quite there yet. Not yet. It's getting close, and this is what the main takeaway that I've gotten from this entire situation is there is a gigantic portion of the United States of America that is just fed up with this bullshit and wants the problem solved, and they don't really give a fuck how it gets done. And that can be not such a good thing, if you know what I'm saying. It can be pretty bad if it goes too far. And that's one of the reasons why the oppositional party system kind of works the way it does, is that the party not in power will keep the party in power in check in some form or fashion. And it seems like that's what the Democrats are trying to do. They're not doing a very good fucking job of it. But, I mean... I think one of the main reasons is the way that they're messaging this, because the entire time they blue team, the entirety of the blue team, with the exception of maybe a few people, were hyping up the fact that Garcia's, I think that was his name, right? That was his name? Garcia's? I keep forgetting. So Gilmar Abrego Garcia. Yeah, here we go. So Garcia was denied his due process because he had a withholding of deportation, which prevented him from being deported without going before a judge and having that revoked and having the ability to plead his case as to why it shouldn't be. And the entire conversation has been more about how much of a good, sweet baby angel this motherfucker is, rather than the problem of the Trump administration violating a court order. And I think it's a lot of the reason that the Democrats and blue team in general, I think the reason they jumped on this is because if they could humanize this man and show his face to the world that he's just a regular dude who got caught up by a fascist, then they could be like, oh, they could basically prove that Trump was a fucking Hitler, right? That's essentially why I think they jumped all over it, because many of them think a lot of the criminality hype around like MS-13 and these, criminal gangs that are from other countries where people are slightly brown and not white. They like, it's like in their brain, they know it to be true, but they have to fucking believe their religious ideology so hard that it kind of creates cognitive dissonance. And they don't realize that a lot of these dudes are probably pretty bad. So using them to draw up sympathy can backfire magnificently. And I'm pretty sure this is a great example of it, because at first it really did look like, yeah, he may have been an illegal, but he had this thing, he went through a court process and he was given the ability to stay and work here. That was the original narrative. And then it turns out, well, yes, he has the ability to stay and work here, but it wasn't asylum, it was a withholding, which is completely different. And it only means he can't be deported back to his home country, not that he can't be deported at all. And on top of that, it looks like he is absolutely involved in criminal activity. Now, it's still mostly alleged, but the same people who are, bitching about processes not being followed are the same ones bitching about the police lying on the form and committing perjury when it's like they have no proof that that's the case, right? And this is the kind of thing. This is how police work is done, right? Do police lie? Sure, but way it goes. And so you have this complicated web of bullshit where each side is trying to get the one up on the emotional argument, and the problem is that blue team forgot the main rule when you're trying to push political propaganda. You want to make sure the person that you're backing is not a complete and utter piece of garbage. Now, back in the day, this meant that you couldn't have any immorality at all. So, if you were like a single mom, you're out. If you were, if you did any kind of drugs at all, period, you're out. If you had some kind of mental problem, you're out. Like you had to be like damn near perfect so that the white waspy motherfuckers would like even begin to deign to give you humanity, right? But that's not the case anymore. You can be pretty much a fucking degenerate asshole so long as you're not a like actual criminal. Most people will be sympathetic to you, no matter what your situation is, right? Because the vast majority of people are basically like, I don't give a fuck what you do, just don't fuck with me, right? And that's essentially where a lot of people are at in the country, and as far as like race and all that shit relations go, yeah, I'm down with that. I'm absolutely down with that. So, as I'm rambling, the reason I bring this up is because, and it's not only because I saw this and I thought it was kind of funny, because is it a valid argument? Not really, because that's not how due process works. But is it an argument that works? Yes, it does. And
about due process. No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. The problem with things,
his Asmongold impression,
things that are going in a radical direction, and then there's an overcorrection. So the overcorrection
We're at the
is lack of
overcorrection.
due process.
Yep.
The overcorrection is like round them all up, ship them to jail. Like that's like some things that you say when you're not thinking things through. Like, what do you do about all the criminals? Take them all, fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
What about due process? No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. What if you are an enemy of, let's not say any current president. Let's pretend we got a new president, totally new guy in 2028. And this is a common practice now of just rounding up gang members with no due process and shipping them to El Salvador. You're a gang member. No, I'm not. Prove it.
Yeah, this is the danger of one, believing police officers without corroborating evidence. So the police report that was generated when Garcia was apprehended, arrested with 2 MS-13 gang members, and they had a confidential informant corroborate that he was also in the gang. This is why it's supposed to go through the courts to determine if this is the case. And 2 judges said they determined it, and another one said, oh, well, maybe not. So, well, that's just the way it goes, I guess. But this is the issue, is that if the Trump administration violates this court order and is not held accountable for violating the court order, what will they violate next? That's the question that a lot of the blue team is asking, and it's actually a valid one, because it really is. This is the problem when you allow these things to go under the radar. And almost everybody on the red team is kind of just letting it go. Kind of just letting it go because of this. And it's like, I understand why. And it's like, I keep bringing up pictures of Lincoln and all this other stuff. And it's like, because there are a lot of people who think that it's already gone too far, and it's gone so far that action needs to be taken. Extrajudicial action needs to be taken. Right. And the reason I bring up Lincoln is because, he jailed his political opponents. He jailed journalists. He shuttered newspapers, yada, yada, so on and so forth. He violated a bunch of fucking constitutional amendments and the rights of citizens all over the fucking place, and was an absolute tyrant about it. And we praise his ass and consider him one of the greatest presidents in U.S. history, who kept the country together as a tyrant, mind you.
What? I got to go to court. No due process.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's dangerous, Joe.
Now, it's not likely that I'm going to get picked up and the cops are just going to be like, all right, you're a gang member, and hand me over to ICE. Like, it's not likely that's the case, but the thing about it is like, imagine you are just some white dude who is an immigrant and you're on here on a green card or some other type of shit. It's entirely possible it could happen, right? Like, the police aren't nearly as racist as people think they are, because they will treat, if you are part of a white community that is considered white trash, they will absolutely 100% treat you like they do the people in the ghetto that are black, because that's how they see you. I think the white and black thing, some of that probably still exists to a certain extent, but I think a lot of it has to do more with class and perception of class. Because, like, if you're driving in a modest family car and you're relatively well dressed, and you're relatively well spoken, and you're somewhat respectful, and you're not running your fucking mouth off, and your wife is not running her fucking mouth off, and it's just your normal interaction with a normal person who just happens to be a police officer, yada yada yada. 9 times out of 10, 99,999,000, all the way, like, minuscule percentage that they'll do something super fucking crazy, right? Because the vast majority of cops aren't corrupt. They are doing their jobs the way they're supposed to be. But here's the thing. If you are extremely disrespectful, you have to remember that you're dealing with a human being. And so when you're dealing with cops, it is one of those deals where how you act, how you present yourself, and everything around that will determine how they interact with you, because they're just human. Should they be more professional than that? Sure, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that way. That's not how the world works. The world doesn't work the way it should work. The world works the way it is. And so you're dealing with human beings. And how many times have you seen cops talking to a dude, and they're talking back and forth, and the cop ends up arresting the dude, but the dude doesn't resist. The dude doesn't cuss out the police officer. He's entirely respectful. What happens? They turn around. They put their hands behind their back. The cops handcuff them. No physical violence is needed. They escort them to the back of the vehicle. They open the door. They set them in. They comply with the officer's orders, and everything is done. And nobody gets hurt. Right? Because they're not being fucking dumbasses. That has a lot to do with it, because if you're gonna, here's the thing. It's like, if a cop is an authority figure, and if you're going to scream and yell and be pseudo-violent toward an authority figure of the government, like, what the fuck is up with you? What is wrong with you? So this automatically sets a person off around you that's going to be like, it's going to make anybody standoffish, not let alone a police officer, right? Because they do represent that authority. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean they can arrest you and shit for fucking, telling them to fuck off. But the point is that you are so bent over backwards on doing this, it does, engender feelings in others. Now, this doesn't mean that officers shouldn't be professional. I've seen plenty of officers address dudes who flip them off and tell them to fuck you with, like, all right, have a nice day. And that's it. Actual professionals.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous.
That's dangerous. Yes. He's talking about due process. Let's listen to that again.
Process.
No due process.
That's dangerous, Joe.
That's dangerous. Yes. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. We got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters. I think due process exists for a reason, and the reason is it is horrific for someone to be accused of something they didn't do, be imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, and then live in a cell, live in a cage with a bunch of
people who did commit shit.
Here it is, Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, we'll get into this, but he's right, and this is the big thing that I think Blue Team missed out on their messaging on this, is they attached too much to the individuals, trying to humanize them to drown up sympathy, right? When, of course, everybody on Blue Team is going to be overly sympathetic, but everybody else in the country is just going to look and be like, well, he was an illegal immigrant. And so the fact that they tried to use the man as an emotional weapon, I think may have backfired on a good portion of the population. Because, like I said, everybody on Blue Team is gonna fawn over it, and everybody on Red Team is gonna scream at it, and then half the people in the middle are just gonna be like, and then the people left in the middle are just gonna be like, why don't, whatever. He was a fucking illegal. The vast majority of Americans think we should deport all illegal aliens. So he was an illegal alien, and I think the fact that they weren't messaging on that, on the breaking of the court order specifically, and the fact that they've been screaming that he's Hitler for months, for years at this point, and it's all fascism, all up and down. It's like, well, nobody's listening to that shit anymore. So when they're making memes about loading immigrants onto planes, and they're comparing it to loading, fucking Jews on the train track, on the train cars, like you've lost so many people already because they just don't believe you, because none of that shit happened during his first term, right? He's not been saying he's gonna fucking round up people and put them in fucking extermination camps. He's been saying he wants to deport the illegal immigrants. This is a simple message that resonates with a good portion of the United States. So you have to realize that a good portion of the United States is biased against Abrego Garcia. Just on the basic fact that he is an unauthorized immigrant, illegal alien, criminal. And I have to use all of that because unauthorized immigrant is what the government designates him as. Illegal immigrant is the common parlance. And the fact that he is both of those things makes him a criminal.
It's better 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent person should suffer. That is wisdom that has survived hundreds of years. It's incredibly accurate, and it is the foundation of freedom. Like, we have to...
Here we go.
It's
Benjamin
better.
Franklin commit shit.
Here it is. Benjamin Franklin. It's better 100 guilty persons should escape than one.
It's better that 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent
person should suffer.
He kind of stuttered there, so I wanted to make sure that was that. And the thing about it is that it is a principle that is the foundational aspect of our justice system, and of the fact that justice is supposed to be blind. We're all supposed to be equal under the law because we're all equal before God, right? That's kind of the basis of our justice system. Now, of course, it's not always been this way. In fact, it never really has been fucking fair. Even today, it's not fair, right? Because if you're fucking poor, if you're fucking white trash or from the ghetto, there's a good chance you're probably gonna get fucked, right? It's a non-zero chance, that's for damn sure. And even normal people get fucked over, and a lot of it has to do with prosecutorial, people messing up and prosecutorial corruption and such.
That is wisdom that has survived hundreds of years. It's incredibly accurate, and it is the foundation of
just the way he says it
freedom.
Survived hundreds of years.
We have to make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters. You can't.
He is right, and this is the problem with the Trump admin violating the goddamn court order. And I mean, they did say, "Oh, it was an administrative thing," and a lot of people on the right on Red Team have been, downplaying the fact. Tim Pool, especially, has been downplaying the fact that they violated this order. Now, you can not like the order; that's fine. You can argue that the order should have never existed. Okay, I can listen to that argument. The problem is that our system is the system. We have to go through the system. Right? The system is important because once you throw away the system and it's no longer there, then we have chaos. That's the whole point of the institution, is to give us some grounding in reality, to give us some place we know to look. And if we destroy this, what comes next is going to be absolutely horrible. Absolutely 100%.
Can't. Like, what is that? When you fight monsters, be careful that you don't become one.
Become one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important. It's very important.
You should be a monster.
You can't do that. It's one of those things where to support one side of this, you have to deny some, like, basic human values. Yep. Either way. Like, to support just rounding people up and just assuming they're all gang members. I'm not saying they're doing that, but this is the worst case scenario, right? Yeah. They get a bunch of people in a room, they rope them all in, and one guy's just someone's cousin picking someone up to give him a ride home. That's possible.
And now you're back on the one innocent person now you're right back.
And what if that dude is not doing anything wrong and he's got some stupid tattoos, and they decide that this guy's a gang member, and now you're in a prison in El Salvador, and you're not even from El Salvador. And now, you were just a hairdresser, or you were a tattoo artist,
family
or whatever
man.
you are.
Yeah.
You came over here, and maybe you got a green card, and maybe you don't. Maybe you were just given asylum, because a lot of people from Venezuela were given asylum in America.
Yeah.
And then you get shipped to El Salvador, where you're not even from El Salvador. So that the fact that exists scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, and it should. And that's the thing that we got to remember. And the thing that really gets me about this is that there are so many people that are downplaying and excusing the breaking of the court order. And again, we can have the conversation. We're mature enough and are able to like talk about these things, about when it is time to do such things, right? Because we know in history that there are always times when the rules are broken, and the people that broke them are considered heroes and visionaries and the people that like kept us together, all these types of things. We make up all kinds of bullshit to make these individuals heroes. And kind of, deny a lot of we kind of just don't remember a lot of the stuff, like with George Washington, for instance, and some of the fucked up shit that he did, especially as president. And freaking other founding fathers accusing him of being a British spy. That'll just never get old. So, like, the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? And the funny thing is that if you do research a little bit about George, we're not going to get into his history, but if you do research a little bit about his history and find out some of the fucked up shit he did, you can understand why Thomas Jefferson might be like, he might actually be a fucking British spy. So it was pretty funny. Anyway, so and you got to remember, like, the blame for all of this rests solely upon Red Team here, because Red Team should be making sure that their administration, that the person who's representing them in the government, who is literally the executive, and his administration are following the rules. This is absolutely something that should be done. And I'm sympathetic with the argument that, well, he's deported already, and it was just a withholding order, and we have all this evidence that, he is a bad hombre. So fuck it, we ball, right? And it's like, again, you can make that argument, but how do we come to a resolution on the fact that the Trump administration violated this court order? What are we to do about that? What does the Trump administration do as recompense? Does he give recompense to the person, the criminal potential MS-13 gang member that we just deported to El Salvador? Do we give it to his family? Right? Who, like, I don't even know that situation, so it doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned. But there needs to be some type of restitution. There needs to be some type of reckoning as far as the violating of this court order, because it's just not right. You shouldn't do it. We should follow the procedures, and if you don't like the procedures, get them fucking changed, right? It is one of these things that ICE agents do have a lot of power. Some of them do have a lot of power to just listen to somebody's plea, and if they think they're full of shit, they send them on. Now, obviously, I don't think these are just the regular day-to-day agents. I think these are the like higher, more trained senior people who deal with a lot of this more shit. I don't really know the specifics, but I do know that some of them have quite a bit of power to determine whether asylum claims, from people coming across the border are legit or not, and whether they should be given any credence. And so, while that is the case, we cannot have people being rounded up in the United States without giving some verification through the courts that they are who they say they are, that they are who we think they are, and that they are here illegally, right? Because, like he said, you could pick up somebody. It's like some dude's cousin, and he gets mistaken for somebody else because a cop wrote down, oh look, he was wearing a Chicago Bulls jersey that had all this bullshit on it, and it didn't, right? Because he lied, because that happens. Even though I was just defending the same police report, it fucking happens. We can't deny it, right? So we have to keep it in mind when we're determining like how the universe may possibly turn on itself and which possibilities could manifest in the future. We have to take all of these things into account, because if you don't, then you can't accurately predict the future, right? And so I have a feeling that this will probably play out in the courts with a few other things with the Supreme Court, but I don't actually think anything's going to be done about the Trump administration. And because Garcia was an illegal alien, and he was a criminal for that, and it looks like there's quite a bit of evidence ties him to MS-13, I don't think he's going to make too much more news outside of a blue circle simply due to that fact, because you've basically you were playing. I'm going to make an emotional argument, and the Trump administration and red team said, well, if you're going to play the emotional argument, I'm going to play the emotional argument, and they both did. And I think the red team's emotional argument won out. Especially and specifically, I think the main reason it won out is because the blue team put so much onto the one man to like support their argument that once it kind of was revealed that it's entirely possible he's part of MS-13 and that they weren't fucking around with that, that is an actual serious consideration. It kind of feels like it just fell off and just flopped, right? Well, that doesn't mean, and here's the thing, is that doesn't mean that they should be violating his rights, regardless of whether he's an MS-13 gang member or not, because if you're a human, you have human rights. Simple as that. It doesn't matter if you're a fucking part of a gang that says murder, rape, and control, right? That's the way it's supposed to work. And I don't really believe that blue team will be able to hold red team to account for this, specifically due to the fact of the emotional argument falling apart. Now, I don't know if going with the technical argument about violating court orders would have worked either, because just like with everything else, they would have equated it to Nazis, and this would make a good portion of the American population just roll their eyes and ignore them. Because if you're going to start screaming about Nazis, we're done with that shit. If you continue down that road, you are just going to fucking continue to lose. There's just, yeah. And the thing that really pisses me off is that I could understand the messaging more about the fascism and Trump being a Nazi and all these motherfuckers who work for him being Nazis, if blue team were actually offering solutions to the problems that Americans want fixed, like immigration, actual solutions, not bullshit. Democrat Fifi's fucking solutions about being nice to people and fucking letting everybody in and, letting criminals just fucking run free in our country. No. Actually solve the goddamn problem, and you will get a lot of people on your side, especially if you can solve the problem and not be a dickbag about it. Let's see. Was there anything else on this subject that I wanted to touch on? Not really, but this is tangentially related. We need a revolution, Democrats. I mean, people on the right have been saying this forever too, and this is, from my experience, this is pretty much accurate. I remember them doing a survey of the United States military when I was on political preferences. Now, obviously, you didn't have to answer, but the vast majority of people in the United States that in the military that I knew, Army, Navy, I knew a bunch of Marines too. Didn't know too many Air Force bros, but all of us filled out the form because. Basically, even because one, your name is detached from it, so the military doesn't actually know your political leanings. But this was done, and it was touted as to be like, look, we need to do a census of the military so we can get a feel of how the military is, so that we make sure we're not doing anything wrong. We need to know where everybody's at. And it was basically like, we want to make sure we're not actively discriminating against people for whatever reason. Just based on stats. And one of the things that they came out with is that the vast majority of individuals in the military lean right. Now, when they say lean right, a good portion of that lean right is like libertarian with the little L, where it's like they're fully accepting of gays, all the degenerate homosexual shit. You do whatever you want, bro. It's your life. Do your thing. I'm gonna go over here and be a soldier or a sailor or an airman or a Marine, right? And you do your thing, I do mine, and we're good. And there were a lot of dudes in the military like that who were like, just that, like, they didn't want nothing to do with it, but they're like, I don't give a fuck, dude. I just don't give a fuck. And I've told the story before of the gay people on my submarine who basically everybody knew they were gay, and nobody gave a fuck. And a couple of them even like openly, talked about it and stuff, which was kind of dumb because they were still don't ask, don't tell. But so many people just did not give a fuck, dude. Because, we literally made fun of everything. So if you're a homosexual, you're going to get made fun of. And the best part is that we had specific homosexual stuff. We had specific things for homosexuals where it's like, you tell your boy who's not a homosexual to go eat a dick. But if your boy is a homosexual, you tell him to go eat a dick. He's like, well, where is it? I need me one. right? So you got to come up with something better. So you go tell him to like munch on some carpet, and then he starts throwing things at you. Yeah. that was fun. That was really fun. And this is how you bond, right? You know what I mean? Full of greetings and salutations. This is how we bonded. This is how, you know, in a submarine full of mostly heterosexual men, like a gay cook became, you know, the life of the party. And it wasn't because he was flamboyantly gay. It was because he was just a regular fucking dude who just happened to like, you know, banging other dudes, right? And that was why. And so he was just like everybody else, except not, right? And so the thing about it is that a lot of the people on you see this, and a lot of people on the red team think, oh, they're on my side. They're on my side because of the dichotomy. When a lot of people in the military are more live and let live, and they like guns. So yeah, they lean more right, but there's a lot of them that are like, you know, pro, you know, universal health care, and a lot of stuff that the Democrats tout for, you know, the middle class and the working class and stuff like that, right? Some of them are lean red because of taxes and stuff like that, but a lot of it is a lot like I am now, where it's like, yeah, you know, I hate being taxed, but if I am going to be taxed, I want my tax money to go to actually something that's fucking worth a damn, and not just go down some bureaucratic fucking drain and just disappear into the nether, right? There were a lot of dudes like that too. And so you have a variety of political opinions and political leanings. They're not just, you know, blue or red or Democrat or Republican. Sure, there are people like that, but I've met very few actual partisans in the military, unless they were hiding their power level actively. The vast majority of people that I interacted with and had knowledge of were not that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty sure my first captain was a Democrat. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But we almost never talked about those kinds of things. You know, it's like one of those things. You know, what is it? You when you're hanging out, you don't discuss politics and religion in polite company. And what that means is that in polite company, it's like you're trying to be social and be nice and have genuine human interaction without too much bullshit, right? And so most of the time it was just whatever. And when we did talk about it, it was more just like generalities. You know what I mean? Anyway, so this tangentially relates to what Joe Rogan was talking about, due to the fact that, you know, there have been people who are calling for the dissolution of the fucking Supreme Court because they smacked down Trump when he was trying to support some Venezuelan migrants. God only knows, right? Why do you never play hide and seek with sailors? They always anchor away. Why was the sea punctual and never like tidalness? Oh God, it's so bad. It's so bad. But it does tangentially tie into this, because it's like, because there is this perception that when Democrats say they want a revolution, that the military wouldn't necessarily side with them. And I'm gonna tell you right now, that's not the case. From the way I understand the military is that it is varied, and that there are probably partisans who would, you know, pick their side no matter what. But the vast majority of men and women that I encountered in the military, you know, no matter how goofy or degenerate or whatever they are, one of the things that like bound us together was that sense of duty and honor, and specifically to the Constitution of the United States. And so when I say, if I was a patriot like I am now back during the Revolutionary War, it's entirely possible I would have sided with the British. This is why. Is because this is how I viewed it when I was in the military, and it's how I view it today, is that if something like that were to break out, my decision would not be based on which team I want to be on. It would be based on who is actually the one who is going to defend the Constitution and fight for specifically the Constitution, not just power or glory or what the fuck ever, right? Soldiers like guns and their country and will want to be taken care of after fighting does to them what fighting does to people. Case for both sides of the aisle. Yes, it is. It's not just that though. It's that you when you join the military, you meet people from all different walks of life. Like there were guys who came from wealthy families who barely ever knew what scarcity was, and there were guys that came from fucking trailer parks and ghettos. You know what I'm saying? One of my good friends when I was in school was from fucking Baltimore ghetto, and he was whiter than me, and he sure the fuck didn't act like it. That's for damn sure. And everybody thought it was an act, but it was literally because he was from Baltimore. His peers were a bunch of black dudes. His entire growing up, he was a minority essentially, where he grew up at and where he went to school, and so he integrated into the culture that he was at, and so that's what he acted like. And then you meet people who are like from fucking Africa. A guy in my boot camp was from Africa, and he joined the United States Navy to get citizenship so he could immigrate to the United States. By the way, I fully support that. 100%. Yep. He was a cool dude too. Oh, why don't sailors play cards? Because someone is always on deck. Oh man, that was so bad. That was so bad. Well, Amazing Barrel, I'm nature versus nurture. I think it's definitely both. You know what I mean? And one of the reasons is because you can have like twins that grew up, adopted twins that grew up in separate households, and they have these really weird similarities. And then you have the same thing where it's like you have a family of 5 kids, and all of them have different personalities. They act different, just a whole thing. And a lot of it is because it's basically, this is how I view it, is that nature gives you a framework for for who you are. It's basically like the hardware on a computer, right? It's the RAM, it's the hard drive, the GPU, the CPU, all your fans, all that shit. That's your hardware. That's what you're born with, right? That's the genetics that you have. And then what happens is that nature essentially writes the software that runs on the hardware. And the funny thing about it is how genetics works is that based on your nurture, your genetics can change based on the environment that you're in. So if you're in a more stressful, depraved environment, that can change how your genes that you have as your hardware express themselves in the real world. So it could change parts of your personality. It could make you manifest different behaviors, or even specifically like diseases and such like that, right? Just based on the environment that you're in. Whereas if you're in a different environment, you would manifest them in different ways, but you're still the base hardware, right? Like for me, I'm the base hardware. I am always going to be white. That is not going to change, right? I'm always going to be male. That is not going to change. And till we get, maybe you could change both of those when we have Star Trek stuff, but not now, right? And so that framework and the framework that, that my brain works under with its limitations and its perks, because, I may be ADHD, rattled, fucking memory hold, but I have the ability to hyper focus like nobody else. So, especially if it's something I'm interested in. Like it helped me immensely in school. I cannot stress that. Because I was the guy who could basically just, do lectures and then study really hard before an exam, pass the exam, and I still retain quite a bit of the knowledge. And it's because I don't cram before the beginning of the test. It's like I said, I can hyper focus, so I actually do absorb it and learn it. And it's not like I wasn't, paying attention before. It's just I didn't have to like study hard the entire time. Favorite Star Trek minus Picard? It's definitely between Picard and Sisko. Like it's really hard because they're all really good. The reason Janeway is not in between them is basically the holier than thou. Starfleet is my ideology, and I'm going to follow it impractically as much as I possibly can. Bullshit. And Kirk was a badass, but I mean, like Picard, man, and Sisko were just that was refined Captain Kirk. Captain Picard and Sisko, like this is how it feels, is that Picard is a more refined version of Kirk, where where he still can do immense violence. He's still a ladies' man, but it's far more reserved. And then Cisco is a correction to Picard being so stuffy, in that he's a lot more relatable. Right, that's one of the reasons they gave him baseball as a thing, because it's the all-American sport. That's what they were trying to go for there. And so anyway, on captains, that's funny. Both with the twins, if you put them in families that are similar socioeconomically, it's basically the same nurture. Yeah, but they can still manifest in different ways. However, there's still a lot of ways that they manifest that are similar. And so it's definitely a mix of the two, and based on the person depends on where that's going to go. All right, I just thought this meme was funny as shit. JD Vance went to meet the Pope